Well, welcome everyone to the webinar today. Thank you so very much for joining us. We have an exciting one for you. My name is Derek Torvik. I will be your host. So it's proactive denial prevention, introducing the OP claim scrubber. And we have two great speakers, of course, Stuart Newsome and Ali, if you can just go back one slide, please. We have two great speakers for you today. Stuart Newsome, who's the Vice President of Corporate and Client Experience from Alpha 2, and our very own Matt Tadros, who's the Director of RCM Product and Technologies. And so here's what we'll be going over today on the webinar. Firstly, how revenue integrity impacts your practice's bottom line, the true cost of claim denials, and how OP's integrated claim scrubber will save you time and money. So it's really exciting. And as I just said, we do have two great speakers today. Once again, Stuart Newsome is with us from Alpha 2, who is the VP of Corporate and Client Experience. And Stuart, I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words just about yourself.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. And I've been in this business for a long time and seen a lot of changes over the years. But one thing that seems to resonate is denials. Denials seem to always raise their ugly head. And so I'm just hoping that today's webinar will be very informative for everyone and that it can be productive for them to mitigate those.
Lovely. And of course, our very own Matt Tadros, who's the Director of Revenue Cycle Management, Product and Technologies with Office Practicum. Matt, if you would like to say a few words about yourself.
Thanks, John. Sure. Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I am the product director on the practice management and RCM side of the house here at OP. And obviously, everything that my team and I do is to make your jobs easier, more efficient, and specifically in regards to today's session, more financially sound. So we're very excited to show you some of the product developments that we've done regarding Claim Scrubber and how it's going to benefit you financially.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. And Stuart, I will let you take it away.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So as we progress to the next slide, I always like to start off with a quote from one of our clients that stated this many, many years ago. And I'll just read it. As I read it, just want to make sure that everyone reflects on this and see if this resonates. First of all, he starts off by saying, if you look at a traditional billing office, it's very reactive in their processes. Providers are providing care, documenting their services, and then there's coding that's occurring. A billing office is getting charges entered in and bills out of the door. And then they basically wait until they get a response from the clearinghouses, maybe the payers, in the form of rejections as well as denials. Then they react to those, right? He goes on to say that this is a terribly inefficient process. I hope everyone will agree with that. It delays the payment cycle, it reduces the probability of payment, and then he basically states is a big proponent of flipping that whole cycle upside down to build a much more proactive revenue cycle. And this is where I kind of got the term of being proactive during your revenue cycle. So there's things that can be done throughout the system that can help mitigate denials in the end, but also mitigate work processing, getting the claims out the door to begin with. So he goes on to say that diligence is needed to scrub claims to make sure they're clean before they go out the door. In every practice, you know, if a patient is eligible before the doctor sees the patients, it's solvable. Now, in that one last sentence, he's pinpointing one problem, but it is solvable across the whole continuum of care in the entire RCM cycle. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll see that what he's talking about here is this revenue cycle wheel. I think everyone has certain depictions of what a revenue cycle will look like, what they have in mind. This is very similar, so it may vary from what maybe you have in mind. But typically you have some kind of registration process, particularly maybe a pre-registration process where before the patient comes in, then once they're there, there's some kind of patient collection method that I hope is occurring, where there's maybe some estimations, there's some co-pays, maybe even some deductibles that are being collected. And the idea there is that at least in recent years, there's been a process of getting paid at that point by the patient, that you don't wait until the claims are processed and then send a statement, because that's inefficient as well. And I can remember back in the day, the credit cards were like taboo. No one wanted to bill, charge their patients credit cards. They thought it was maybe offensive to have credit cards on the front end. And that was just a few years ago, but now it's kind of commonplace. It's kind of like, yeah, this is obvious. We need to do this. And that's very commended that industry going that direction, because every little bit matters, especially in a world where the patient is becoming one of the largest in an industry. So then we move on to the point of care, where the patient's actually being seen by the provider, and that's where all the magic happens, right? That's why the patient's there. They're there for a problem. They're being evaluated for that problem. The physician dictates some level of care, orders some tests, things are going on there. And then all that information then has to be transferred to what I term as charge capture. Many people may call it the encounter level, where they're entering those charges, entering the codes, all the coding's being done, and that has to translate. Are the codes interpreting exactly what happened at the point of care? Because coding matters. A lot of people think, well, we can just throw something out there based on what we typically get paid. But the more precise your coding can be, the more precise you're going to let the payer know exactly what happened in that encounter. And then you submit the claims. And in a perfect world, you're going to get paid. And to me, this is the revenue cycle that is intact. In a perfect world, this is the revenue cycle. But we've been conditioned based on the denials, because we all know what typically happens is we get denied. So then what happens? Now what? Well, to me, that's a whole new cycle of where we go into, where we have to look into the denials management process. And if we just kind of go to the next level, we'll see that you have to look at the remittance process. What are those EOBs looking like? Or then you got to invest time in making sure that to go back and research why this was denied. And then you got to reprocess those claims. And then hopefully you would be paid that time around, but many times you aren't. You might have to make decisions, maybe to write things off, maybe to make adjustments, maybe to get paid what you were supposed to get paid. This 7 through 10, sad to say, has been conditioning us to be part of the revenue cycle. And it actually is. I get it. So you're never going to get denials mitigated totally out of the picture. But there are ways to, how do we reduce all the effort in that 7 through 10, where we can come back to that holistic view as what I would call revenue integrity. So the whole notion of revenue integrity is really to fortify that revenue cycle where you're doing 1 through 6 without any interruptions. So if we go to the next slide, we'll look at some analytics that kind of put an emphasis on this. And there are all sorts of analytics reports that people will look at to determine what their KPIs are, where the revenue is going, how they can monitor that revenue. But one of the most common that I see in the industry is called first pass rate or first pass claim rate. And this is really that rate that is actually how many claims get accepted in the first attempt versus the number of claims that are submitted over a period of time, whether it be to a payer or to a clearinghouse. And typically, the average first pass claim rate as an industry standard is anywhere from 95 to 97%. It's typically used as a marketing tool for some clearinghouses out there that, hey, we have a 95 or 97 first pass claim rate. But when you look at that, how does that really correlate to denials and rejections? So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this means maybe my rejection rate is 3 to 5%. But the key word here is accepted. So their claim got accepted means it was dressed appropriately for the party, but maybe its behavior is going to get it kicked out the door. And maybe there's even some partial payments that are included in this. So we'll do a deeper dive into that here just a little later, but I believe in the next slide, we're going to take our first poll.
Yes, we certainly are, Stuart. Thank you so much for that. So attendees, it's up to you, and we have our first of 3 polls today. And the first poll is, what is your current denials rate? And we would like you to select one. Is it 0 to 5%, 6 to 10%, 11% or more? Or I'm not sure. We'll give you about 25 to 30 seconds to answer. And if the OP team could start bringing up some of those results. Okay, so it looks like at 36%, we have 0 to 5%,
Hmm.
and 40%, I'm not sure. Those are making up the majority, Stuart, of what we see here. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, 0 to 5 is very good. I think when you look at some of the stats from associations like MGMA, HFMA, things of that nature, anything below 5% is really the best practice out there, best in the industry. So to be commended on that, that's fantastic. And about 7% they say is acceptable. To me, nothing's acceptable. 0%, but we're never really going to get there. But you do see some that are at 6%. I mean, 11% are plus. But then I'm not sure. It doesn't surprise me in the least. I think a lot of people really don't have a firm grasp on exactly what their denial rate is. So it's really good, interesting to see those numbers. That I kind of see those correlate with kind of the rest of the country. But when you look at claim denial rate, and as I was saying in the earlier slides, how that correlates, that first pass claim rate correlates to claim denial rate. It just doesn't add up. I wasn't very good at math in school, but it's 2 plus 2 equals 3 rather than 4 in my opinion. But the claim denial rate is really that indicator that tracks the percentage of claims denied the first time through. In other words, what percentage actually got denied and pushed back to you versus the ones that actually got paid. And on average, it's about 1 to 5 claims are denied or rejected. Now that's the national average we get from MGMA, HFMA as well. And again, those best practices being anywhere from 5% or below, anywhere maybe 3%. It seems to be unheard of, but that's very exceptional. But the acceptable, what everyone says is it's acceptable as 7%. But if 15 and 20% of all claims are rejected, we look at that and take a deeper dive. Well, how many are ever resubmitted or appealed? And you look at that, and it's 60% of those. So 60% of those percentages typically are never ever resubmitted. And out of that, 18% of denials are never ever collected. So you can see how that trickle down effect goes all the way through to where even though you may be resubmitting it, you're still not going to get all the revenue that you're anticipating. So there's a lot of effort in this. There's a lot of work involved in this. Go to the next slide. We'll see some of the things that are, say, missed factors from a claims denial perspective. They don't show up in a denial percentage such as that. And one that we've shockingly found is line item denials and rejections. The claim may get paid as a whole, but maybe that line item in there was either reduced or denied altogether. So those denials typically look at the total claim paid. So if you have multiple line items and there's certain line items that are getting denied, whereas the claim got paid itself, but at a reduced rate, does that really count as a denial? Well, in their mind, it doesn't. Then there's also underpayments. Are charges submitted equal to the allowed amounts? You definitely want to make sure you're always in tune with the fee schedules according to your payers. We have seen instances when we're scrubbing claims to where we'll see what they're charging is not equal to the allowed amount. And in those instances, obviously they're going to pay you what you submitted if they can pay you more. So those are always instances of my favorites is also missing CPT codes for various code combinations. And a good example that I like to use is injections versus drug codes. There are many instances where we see the administration of the drug was billed, but the drug itself wasn't, or vice versa. And so you can do that in many instances. You should bill both. And so we'll recognize that. It's not a denial because they'll pay it. However, we'll recognize it for you and take a look at that holistically on those opportunities where you could be missing the drug code or the administration code. And then there's always E&M undercoding. And these are just kind of the top three. E&M undercoding to me is one of those things that would take up a whole nother webinar. But I can say that it's a systemic problem throughout the healthcare community where there's a lot more undercoding than there is overcoding to a point where there's money left on the table. And I know there's a bell curve out there, and everybody wants to make sure they're flying under the radar with an audit, but basically you just need to have confidence in your clinical judgment, making sure that you're documenting appropriately. And if your code supports what you performed and what is documented, then everything will be okay. And so I always encourage everyone to code based on, following the guidelines and making sure that it matches up with the risk being involved and the work being involved, because you're underpaying yourself if you're undercoding. And there's also modifiers, some inappropriate uses of modifiers. They won't show up on a denial sheet, but they'll actually have that, again, contribute to reduction in payments. And that's E&M coding, modifiers used for E&M codes, also whether you're using the technical professional component with certain labs and tests and x-rays and stuff like that. And then bundling and unbundling are always something that we see that really may not show up from a modifier standpoint in the use of modifiers. Modifiers really tell that story too. Again, I have a phrase I call coding ease. And coding ease is that language that the payers use to kind of know what's going on in the encounter. And if you're not using the right language, then you're not interpreting to the payer exactly what happened at the encounter. You're not really telling the payer how sick your patients are. Maybe you're telling them just half the story, or maybe it's totally confused, and it's no surprise that they're going to pay inappropriately based on that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see, what is the real cost? You got all these denials. Now we have to determine, well, what's the cost to rework those claims? On average, it's about $6.50 to rework a claim. But if you consider the FTE time it takes for the average FTE employee to work those claims, you got to consider, entering the rejection and denial, and then you got to call the payer at some points, and that we all know how frustrating that can be. You got to research those coding mistakes. Sometimes you got to go back to the medical record, sometimes go back to the provider. Then you got to refile the claim, and then you post another denial if that comes back. Now, by the way, refiling that claim and reworking that claim is $25.20 on average. I have heard some organizations spend as much as $100+ to rework their claims. Now, if it's $6.50 or so to file that claim the first time, actually, to get that claim paid, you've now spent $31.50 on that claim. And if we break that down as this looks, let's take the average practice that's maybe about 10 providers or less, and let's say 10 providers may produce about 2,000 claims per month. And let's just say that your denial rate is 12%. Let's give the benefit of doubt and kind of split the difference between 10 and 15% and say 12%. That's actually going to be 240 claims that either need to be appealed or resubmitted, or also, which is not on here, written off, whatever choices you may have in that. And then if you apply that $25.20 that claim, you're actually spending in excess of $6,000 per month just on the labor to rework those claims. Now, you can actually work this yourself. We have a nice calculator online. If you go to the next slide, this is a screenshot of that calculator. You can actually go to the Office Practicum website, and they have a link here where you can access this ROI calculator, and you can put in your own numbers. And very briefly, I believe if you give me access to share my screen, and then I will make sure yep, here we go. And so as we're showing the screen, you can actually put in your own numbers. And I have the numbers that we put in from the previous slide where we have 2,000 claims at about, and let's say it's about $130 per claim on average. And you can see here, here's that number, cost to rework claims. It's going to calculate that for you, $6,048. That was from that previous slide. And then we look at, well, what those denials represent. And I actually have 12% as the denial rate. So your monthly denials is $31,200. Now let's say that best efforts on average, the average denial management process, it's about, you'll recover about 67% of your denials. And with that, you're going to recover $20,904. That's great, great work. And if you put the cost to rework those claims in there, what you're left over with is a difference, which is about $10,000 or so, plus the cost to rework your claims. Then your actual loss is $16,344 a month. You can actually mark this as an annual. So that's almost $200,000 in annual revenue out the door. Now, for those of you that were in the 5% or less, we can certainly adjust this down to, say, 5%. Well, you're only losing $81,000 basically, and breaking this down specifically. So you can tell how mitigating your denials makes a huge difference. Maybe your recovery efforts are a little better than average. Maybe you're recovering 72%, and maybe the cost to rework your claims, say, is at $20. And so all these factors will then adjust that number for you. So I highly encourage you to go out and look at this calculator for yourself. And now we can just return back. I don't know if we need to, if someone needs to take back control, or yeah. There we go. And if we go to the next slide, we can see kind of what it means to take a proactive approach. And this was a study done by the advisory board. So we've seen that about 67% on average of claims additional denials management process of being reactive. But if you take a proactive approach, it jumps to about 90%. And that's huge, huge. So what I mean by proactive is how can you mitigate those denials in the existing workflow? Traditionally, it's all, the burden is all on the administrative staff on the back end. Make sure those claims are clean. But there's some things that can be done at the provider level. There's things that can be done at the coder level, billing level, to make sure those edits are applied. So that it lessens the burden on the back end when they're looking at claims going out the door. So if we go to the next slide, what I'm really talking about here is we're achieving revenue continuity. And what that essentially means is a coordinated effort between everyone in the organization, everyone in the practice, whether it's the coders, the billers, the clinicians, and if you have compliance staff, which you should, everybody should be on the same page, rolling in the same direction. Don't create any silos, and that typically is what happens. I've seen over the years in healthcare, there's definitely a line that's dividing clinical from business. Well, everything has to work together, so you have to create of consistency throughout the RCM workflow. With the singular goal in mind is to be sure that everyone shares the same goals. You want to prevent revenue loss. You want to reduce days in AR. Which is another impactful stat that people don't realize, that the more your revenue stays in that AR, you're actually losing money and actually spending more resources trying to recoup that money, whether it's been by sending out statements, making phone calls, and other services that are supposed to capture that revenue that should have been captured the first time. So it really affects the overall work optimization. Now, if you're looking at those denials, and if we go to the next slide, it really creates a sense of discontinuity, which breaks down that revenue integrity, which is going to equal denials. And we actually noticed a report by Becker's Healthcare. I think they released this back in February, and they just made a list of the top denials that providers are seeing these days. And so this is their that we put in this image, and you can go out and read the report for yourself. There's a link there that you can go out and access that. But authorizations and provider eligibility, those have always been the top two, it seems, for as long as I've been doing this, and I've been doing this for about 27 years. Coding inaccuracies, again, there's that language. Are you communicating to the payer exactly what happened? And it's more than its revenue. It's really more or less, am I really seeing sick people? Am I just seeing people that aren't so sick? And what I'm referring to is if you're coding your diagnosis codes is not otherwise specified, you're pretty much sending that message that I really don't know how sick these patients are. Use of incorrect modifiers, failure to meet submission deadlines. That's really the kiss of death, in my opinion, that, there are deadlines for both timely filing as well as the appeals process. And if you miss those deadlines, then you're never going to go back and recoup that. But you should have plenty of time to take advantage of those. And I'm not going to go over this entire list, but as you can see there's a lot going on with denials. And again, it seems like these are the same consistent denial reasons over and over and over. So going back to that customer who made that quote, why is that? It's all because of being reactionary and taking that proactive approach. How can we actually solve this? Because there's data and there's resources available in order to solve this. So as we roll into going forward, we do have another poll, and I believe that Derek, if you want to go ahead and put this out there, but it's really kind of having an idea of what denials you're getting.
Yeah, it's great, Stuart. Thank you. And before we get to this poll OP team, I just wanted to remind all the attendees we do have a question and answer segment at the end, towards the end of the presentation. So please feel free to fill those questions in as they come to your mind. And you'll want to stay to the very end because we also have a couple of giveaways as well that you have to be here for. So yes, this next poll is, what types of denials are you getting most often? And we want you to select one of these. Is it coding issues? Is it bundling inclusive services? Is it missing or inaccurate claim data? Or is it changing payer policies? We'll give you about 25, 30 seconds again to vote, and we'll get to your results.
Yeah, and as they're voting, I can tell you a lot of I've noticed as well over the years is you may have a singular reason for a denial, but many times these denials cross over each other. They really affect one another. So, inaccurate coding definitely affects just about everything. So sometimes it's not like one thing or just a group of things, but it's a holistic look at what's happening with all the data.
It looks like we're getting some results, Stuart, and pretty steadily mixed there. But missing or incorrect claim data stands tall at 34%. And then we've got bundling inclusive services at 25%. But I would say, Stuart, that these numbers are fairly equal.
Yeah, they really are. And it's not surprising in the least because when you go out there and see, there are payers that have reports where they go and audit what they paid and why. And these reports will reflect, well, this is the reason why they may have been improper payments. And improper payments is another big thing where just because you got the money doesn't mean you keep the money. So it's another reason why the data has to be accurate and make sure that it's important that it's there. But missing and incorrect claim data, a lot of times that has to do with like referring provider, or is the right provider PIN number in the right place? Does it have secondary insurance in the right place? And when they're looking at claim data, that's typically what they mean. But a lot of that is also the behavior of the patient, which can be aggravating. If the patient gives you wrong information, it can be extreme. And if you're in an RCM world, you're at the mercy of the practice, the provider give you the right information. So I know that can be a headache. All right, so next we roll into, you basically want to take, when you're looking at the denials and you want to assess what is the problem, maybe you have a good denials process, but then you want to look at your RCM workflow as a whole. And how can you apply the proactive approaches within the RCM workflow? So you want to pinpoint where prevention will work best in your processes. And each practice is different. This is not cookie cutter. There are typical templates and typical ways in which you can do that. But the best way is you just want to go in and identify weak points. You want to say it's kind of like a security assessment. You want to be sure, what's going to be the breakdown and where is integrity compromised? Where are those weak points going to be susceptible? And how does data move through the process? How does it come from the EHR? How does it come from the patient? How are you collecting that data? Is there consistency and cohesiveness between processes as the data moves? And when it moves, is some of the data being lost? Is some of it being changed? Are you reflecting on the right data, perhaps? Like, are you receiving the right chart for that patient that day? I've seen instances where the data move, but they pull a chart from a previous encounter that was 6 months prior. So there's all kind of wacky stuff that I've seen. So you just want to make sure you're assessing that and where it's going. And then who is touching the data and how often? When are they touching it? Where? Who is actually going in there and responsible for either putting in the data? Sometimes it is the patient that needs to be evaluated in that instance. Sometimes it is the provider that needs to give the right information, or the coder. So you just need to pinpoint that and see where are those going on. And then you want to question everything. The old adage, we've always done it this way, doesn't mean it's the right way. And we all know things change. Technology changes over time, processes change over time. There's just a smarter way of doing things. So you always want to ask, well, why are we doing this? It's not being defensive. It's not being critical. It's just really asking the question, well, we should question everything that we do just to see if we can do it better. And you also want to insert what I call smart edits, where they can fortify those needs and those weaknesses. So things like a claim scrubber certainly can do. You want to reflect back. We have, other that could probably take up a whole nother session about how you can build backwards from denial codes going all the way back to building some edits. But when you looking at that, it's also beware of alarm fatigue. Some people think we want to turn all the edits on all the time for everyone. Well, that's not the case, because the audience matters. You don't want to have for a coder be the same edits you'd have for a provider. You don't want to have the same edits for a provider that you'd have, necessarily for a back-end claims processing personnel or denials management process. And even in those instances, you don't want it all turned on. Maybe you have a specific problem that you need to work on and improve, and you can dwindle down that alarm fatigue. And I think everyone's probably familiar with what I'm talking about, because if you get an alert over and over and over again, typically it's human behavior that, oh, I know what that means, I'm just going to ignore it. But you keep behaving the way as if for the very reason the alarm was there to begin with. It's like a total ignoring of that alarm. So you just want to make sure that you taper that in such a way that it doesn't create instances where it's ignored. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll see that we have some differentiation between what ClaimStaker, which is the OP claim scrubber that's been integrated into OP's PEM system, and it's very unique in the way that that we like to say not all claim scrubbers are created. First of all, I like to just applaud that it's backed up with a real-time rule engines that's developed by real people. So we have a professional team that includes clinicians. It includes people that have had experience in billing, EDI specialists, those have been administrators and practices. We have obviously software engineers, because we're a software company. Certified coders obviously make up our team as well. So we have this multitude of experts that come together to help not only build these edits and build the content, but also support the product and figure out how to make it smarter. We also have a broad edits across the full continuum of care. And what I mean by that is we have things that cover for ambulatory, for acute care, for post-acute care. We cover multiple specialties and subspecialties. Basically, you have a single sign-on with connectivity, and through our partnership with Office Practicum, it's already there. You have to go to a separate application. Integration is so tight, it's actually embedded within the system. So you won't even know we're there. That's the beauty of it all. We like to be the best kept secret out there from that regard. Is we don't have to have any recognition. We just want people to adopt and use the solution to help them mitigate the denials. It's content driven with a lot of technical edits as well as coding and claims edits. The whole idea is to prevent denials and decrease inaccurate payments. Our content library is updated on a cadence of about every 3 weeks. For some people, that causes a panic. That means, oh, I got to go in there and pay attention to what has been changed. Well, we've just launched a new service that we can configure that for you. You can sign up for various options of services where we'll turn on new edits as they come out for you, and you can see them fire. And if you don't want them, you can go back in there and turn them off. A lot of these edits are highly configurable. What I mean by you can turn off edits within apply to you in your certain situation, because we know that all practices are custom. You can also build your own edits with our easy to use edit wizard for further customization of edits. And if you're a part of a large organization that have multiple locations, and you may want to have different setups and different configurations for each site, we have another new service that allows you to compare that. When we do have new edits come out, you can go in and have what's called an edit compare across your whole organization and make sure either all the edits match up, or maybe you want certain edits turned off for another, and you can have a master edit configuration that configures that for you. And we look at common overlooked or unique edits that we create that really apply to some of those specialties that really get kind of thrown out in the dark, so to speak, by payers, because they are so unique. And we've built a lot of edits around, say, mental health, for hospitals, for critical access hospitals, even skilled nursing facilities, DME, Certainly with pediatrics, there's certain aspects of those that you may certainly touch as well. And there's also like oncology is one specialty that we've recently, well, not recently, in the last couple of years, built a lot of edits around. But we realize that there's pediatric oncology as a specific specialty as well. So those as a subset, we make sure that we try and cover those bases. And then further, as we go to the next slide, you'll see that we have ways of categorizing these edits. And many of the categories have to do with, say, frequency of use limitations. Perhaps there's some medical necessity issues. You saw some examples previously where we had some bundling edits. Then we have COVID-19 testing codes. I know the PHE ended last Thursday, but we also had some edits that had to do that were waived because of the PHE. The PHE kind of had some different regulations and rules that now we're going back. Well, we kept the rules in place, but we adapted so our customers didn't have to. Our customers didn't have to go into the system and worry about which edits to turn off and what special situations. We accommodated those regulations and those waivers due to the PHE regarding, say, telehealth, where you can bill the place of service that is typically billed and get credit for that as a regular E&M service, whether it's within the office or whether it's at the hospital. So a lot of those variations we actually built into the system so our customers didn't have to worry about that. And we also have some severities. And what I mean by edit severities is, not all claims are actually denied or a rejection. You may have those line item denials, like I mentioned earlier. Well, we're going to identify anything that's a line item denial that likely could be fixed and get that claim paid appropriately. And there's also payer discretion. Maybe there's some things that may be actionable. Maybe there's some things that's informational. We'll get the claim paid, but you may get paid more if you go and investigate that before actually submitting it. All of this is done. The whole idea is to make sure that this gives you transparency to what's going on within the claim, before it's actually submitted, so you can be proactive and correct it before it has a chance to become a denial. With that said, I believe we have another poll.
Yes, we do, Stuart. It is our final audience poll. Thank you, attendees. And for this final poll, we're asking you, how are you currently managing your claims process to avoid rejections and denials? We give you 4 choices here: using a claim scrubber offered by your clearinghouse, maintaining updated rules and OP aware, using an in-house manual process, or I'm not sure. We'll give you again about 25 to 30 seconds. All right, and OP team, if we could start pulling up some of those results. Okay, Stuart. So
Yeah.
at 45%, we have using an in-house manual process. There's 2 clear ones that are leading the way by quite a bit. Obviously, the using an in-house manual process and using a claim scrubber offered by your clearinghouse.
Right, exactly. So yeah, the 45% with the in-house manual processes, that doesn't surprise me. We see lots of folks who are still operating with manual processes. Maybe they have, the person who's the guru in the practice, right? That knows everything. Well, what if something happens to that person? Then where are you? And a lot of those manual processes, they're just that, they're manual, and they can help alleviate that. Have an integration point such as OP has done with ClaimStaker, with the OP Claim Scrubber. It just opens up a world of opportunity. You still may have manual processes. I don't think those will ever go away, but you can help alleviate those processes and make your efforts a lot cleaner. And then it's not surprising that seems to be a common response that they rely on their clearinghouse. But just keep in mind that clearinghouses primarily, their purpose, what they consider a clean claim, is that the claim is accepted. It is dressed well for the party, so it will let you in. But then the behavior may get you thrown out, and that's where the denial comes in. So I would just say take a close look at your denials compared to what your clearinghouse is accepting. And if you're thinking that that's a clean claim, and scrubbing it, then that's kind of the veil that needs to be lifted above that. So just be sure to check that out, is all we're saying. Now, I will say that we've had some customers in the past that have told us similar answers. And when on further review, after we took a look at their claims for them and also their remits, they had, these bullet points are really from a customer that had it all together. They had processes in place, and we agreed with them. Yeah, you guys have some great processes in place. But then when we took a deeper dive, these are some of the things we found: that their software was outdated and not receiving updates as timely as they thought. So they were actually looking at data from antiquated edits and content. And despite having those processes in place, their users were skipping over edits. I think that might have been a process of alarm fatigue. And they were also causing denials, even though the processes were put in place. So measures were there, systems were there, those systems just weren't being utilized by their employees. And they were relying on those RTP reports. So like, well, someone's going to catch it on the back end, or we'll handle it. Our job is to get the claim out the door. But then now you're having additional expense by looking at those reports and reworking those reports and not following up in timely manner with missing deadlines. We saw that there were a lot of claims that just weren't filed in an appropriate way. And so they were missing revenue from that standpoint. And then many examples where the claim was paid, but not the full allowed amount, or maybe it was paid and then funds were then later recouped, especially during the PHE, because during COVID, there was a lot of rules being relaxed and regulations shooting around everywhere, and everybody was confused. Guess what? The payers were confused too. So many times they were just paying claims because it was COVID. But now they're going back and auditing those claims and recovering revenue based on what the regulations were, based on the date of service. So essentially, if we go to the next slide, we have found that when you look at that we have done after we've integrated our solution within Office Practicum's RCM services, these were the top edits that we found, because we wanted to have an accurate picture of how it applied to the customer base that OP serves. And when we look at this isn't a list. These are the top 10. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's no surprise, the Vaccine Toxoid Immunization Administration codes mismatched by the AMA guidelines. Again, that means that those mismatched administration codes were not applied appropriately. CPT diagnosis code clinical review recommendations. That's a medical necessity edit, meaning that it's maybe a medical necessity issue. They got a lot of them denied based on injectable NDC validations. There's also some bundling edits where a modifier is allowed, and later down there's also bundling edits where a modifier is not allowed. Unspecified diagnosis laterality identification. I can say this is common across all specialties, but if there's a laterality, this goes back to saying, well, I really don't know which leg it was, or which ear it was, or which eye it was. So it's very important to be very specific with your diagnosis codes, and especially with the onset of Z codes. We're now looking at social determinants of health, which affects now E&M. It also affects quality. If you're in any quality payment programs or value-based programs, those are becoming big factors now. And then diagnosis and age conflict, especially with pediatrics, that seems to be extremely big. So we've seen a
And
lot of, yeah,
Stuart, yeah, this is Derek. It looks like we've got some really exciting questions that have come in. And I know that we do want to get to Matt Tadros as well, so he can give that demo to the attendees. So we're going to move on to that, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. I was wrapping up. Sure.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. And Matt, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you. Let me show my screen here with me. All right. All right, hopefully I am presenting. Derek, can you see my screen?
You bet.
Yeah. All right, awesome. All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. For the remaining, really, the rest of this presentation, I'm going to walk you through what this looks like, feels like, what it does and it doesn't do within OP. And so I really just kind of put this together as 3 easy steps, if you will. If and when hopefully you decide you want this service, what does that entail? What does setup entail? And then what does this product actually look like in OP? So I just put 3 simple steps. You want the service, you sign up for the service, great. So first thing we would do is we would we would enable the service to your database. We would then also create a user login to the edit library, which I'll show you in a moment. So once those 2 items are enabled, within OP, there are simply 2 steps to get the service functioning for the edits to fire off and catch those denials or potential denials. And then lastly, once that's all set up, you're good to go. So the turnaround time on this from a setup perspective is relatively quick, relatively easy. We have a slew of training guides, tutorials, as well as a very large team, internal team, who understands and knows how to set this up and how to work through these edits, because we've been using it internally now for about 5 months or so. Actually, a little greater than 6 months if you include when we started back in late December. Just so you all know, our entire RCM division is using this. So we have well over 100 practices currently who have been using the claim scrubber, the integrated claim scrubber, for some time now. So again, our internal team, our RCM team, is well knowledgeable. They are SMEs in this, and they are using this on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, let me get out of this slide and show you what I'm talking about. Now, view. Let me go into OP here. All right, perfect. So in OP, like I said, from a setup perspective, there are a couple setups that you need to do, and they are in security administration. You have to enable the billing, where is it in here? Billing claims setting, there it is, claims review queue. So you enable that to, we recommend an admin, because enabling that preference for the user will allow them to override claim edits. And I'll explain that in a moment. So really, you don't want to have this service and then give everyone access to override the edits and allow them to push out, right? It kind of defeats the purpose. So we recommend you give that to 1 or 2 of your admins, your billing manager, your office manager. They would get access to override edits if they deem fit. That doesn't mean nobody else in your office will have access to the scrubber and its results. They just don't have the ability to override. Otherwise, everyone else in your practice will have access to the claim scrubber results, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Secondly, you want to enable a global preference within OP. So under global preference, billing, and super bill, we have this new claim scrubber setting, and we recommend that you enable the claim scrubbing, required claim scrubbing, and I'll explain this in further detail in a moment. When I get to the scrubbing screen, it'll make more sense then, but we recommend you enable this. And really, that's it within OP. That's all you have to do in OP. Outside of OP, you will also be granted access to the edits library. And so again, once the service is enabled and you sign up for this, you will be issued an email with a user account, which will allow you to set up your edit library. By default, it comes with best practices, if you will. So you notice on my screen here, we have professional edits, institutional edits. You can create your own user-defined edits. I'm not going to go into all of this today. I'm just going to simply show you what it looks like when you get it. And out of the box, again, you'll select your specialty. We're all pediatrics here, so you'll select pediatrics, and it will auto-populate with the pediatric best practice edit library. And so you will see something like this. This is how it comes out of the box. And you can, by payer class, you can select or enable or disable edits as you deem fit. Now, when you first start, you probably want to leave it as is. And then as the edits start firing off within OP, then you can then, sorry about that, you can determine whether or not you want to alter any of the edits that come out of the box. So again, I'm not going to go into great detail today about this. but this is where the edits are. This is where it resides. You will have access. You can manipulate. You can configure. You can do what you please. It's yours. Yeah, so let me get that out of the way. So back into OP. What you will notice, and regardless of where you enter your charges, whether it's from the tracking screen and you're entering them here or validating them here at the end of the day, or you are in the billing center, under the billing center, and you are under this tab here, regardless of where you want to access and validate your claims, it all resides under the add edit window. Right? That's where it's accessible from. That's where the scrubber is from. What you will see, by the way, when the service is enabled is a new tab in the billing center called Claims and Review. And what the Claims and Review is, think of it as an exception report. So as you are adding your charges and you're scrubbing your claims, regardless of what time you're doing it, either early in the day, middle of the day, end of the day, whenever. As you're scrubbing your claims and an edit occurs, an edit fires and says you need to do something, what OP will do now is put that claim into the Claims and Review tab. And so like I said, think of it as like an exception report. Here are all the claims that have hit some form of edit that requires your review. Okay. So I'll come back to this in a moment. Let me go back to the tracking screen and I will show you how I got to that point. So say it's the end of the day and I'm in the tracking screen and I'm going through and I'm posting my charges. Let me just open one up here. What you're going to see, what's a little different in the add edit window, once the system is enabled, the service is enabled, you're going to see a couple changes to this window. The first, if you notice to the very bottom, there are scrub claim, save and queue, save, and cancel. And if you recall a few minutes ago, I said about that global preference, you want to check that box. And the reason why you want to check that box is if that preference is selected, the save and queue and the save buttons here will fire off the edit automatically, as will the scrub claim. So scrub claim, save and queue, and save, these three buttons will, as soon as you hit any of those three, will fire off the real-time edit processing. Okay. Additionally, there's a new tab up top as well called Scrub Report. And this is where the report that comes back in the real time of the findings of the edit. So here, I'm just going to scrub the claim right now. It says this claim's already been queued for transmission, scrub and remove. That's fine. This is the demo database, so it's a little funky here. But I don't know if you even noticed that. This window popped up right here. The scrubbing return has errors. Do you wish to view them now? I say yes. It opens up the scrub report and it tells me exactly what's wrong with this claim based on my edit library. And so here it's telling me that the CPT and HICPIC diagnosis combination may be clinically questionable for medical necessity, right? And it's actionable. It's telling me to take some type of action. So what's nice about this is I can actually fix this right now. I don't have to leave where I am to fix it. I can go into the basic information. I can add an ICD if I need to. I can come down to the charge line. I can make my updates here. Say if it's missing a modifier or it's a wrong diagnosis, instead of diagnosis 1, I have to have a different diagnosis or add additional diagnosis. I can make my changes here, and then I can scrub it again. And I can keep scrubbing over and over and over, right? Now, I'm doing it right on the fly. As I'm doing my daily charges, I'm doing it in this window. But say I'm doing my work and I realize I don't have time to fix all of this today. I'm just going to kind of go run through my list and I'll fix the edits tomorrow. I'm going to cancel this. And this is where the billing center claims and review button will work in your favor. Because the claim didn't leave the door. It came to the claims and review tab for me to come back and work it. And so what's nice about this is either I can come in, tomorrow when I come in, I can go through and say, oh, I forgot, what was this issue? What was the problem with this patient? To the far right here, I have a little icon, it's like a little report icon, probably tough to see on your end. But if I click on it, it actually reopens the scrub report. So again, it's telling me that the diagnosed CPT combo is clinically questionable or maybe clinically questionable, go fix it. So what I can do is I can, as it's highlighted, go ahead and hit edit. It opens back up again to the add edit window. Again, if I want to see that scrub report one more time because I forgot between the 2 seconds it took me to open this, I can come back and read this again. And again, I can make my modifications, and then I can scrub it again, and hopefully it's clean and it goes out the door. If it comes back clean and it saves in queues, it actually will fall off of this report. So let's take a look at Ashley Devon here. I'm just going to edit. I'm going to open it up and take a look at the report. And so what Ashley Devon scrub report is telling me, it's telling me that the diagnosis reported does not support this level of E&M code. And it's also telling me that the CPT and diagnosis combination is also clinically questionable. So here it's telling me that it looks like I'm using a sick visit with a diagnosis code for a well child. So I want to make that modification. I want to fix that. And I can do so. Again, I can add another diagnosis code and update the diagnosis code. Or I can change the CPT code, right? I can make all my modifications here, scrub the claim again, and hopefully it'll come back clean. Let me pick this one here. Let me see Julia, what's going on with Julia. Go ahead and edit that one. Take a look at the scrub report. And it's telling me that these two codes cannot be built together with the same date of service and that I should have a modifier. So really what this one's telling me is that these two codes can't be built together without a 25 modifier. And so I can actually, this one, I can just go ahead and put 25 and save that. Let's go ahead and scrub the claim. Oh, something about the referring provider here. Let's go back over here, take a look. Not liking that referring. Let me change that referring. And again, let us use. That one. Okay. Select. Go ahead and save. Go ahead and scrub. We wish to view. So it's coming back and telling me now that the ANSI loop 2300 element, this is a different error, had failed. And what this is telling me is this is more of a structural error that the provider is not set up properly in the provider master. It's missing probably an NPI or a tax ID number. This is going to reject the claim. So again, hopefully you guys don't encounter something to this level because this is more of a configuration setup on my end. But it's going to stop the claim. Now, say this is not a true error, right? Say I'm okay with this one. I want this one to pass. Say no, I'm done with this one. Say I still want to push it out, right? The error that the edit that popped up that came back is I feel is inaccurate. My payer has historically always paid me. I have no problems with that edit. I'm going to go back to my edit master and I'm going to fix it. If you recall earlier when I talked about that user security preference, right, under admin and security admin, and I said you can override an edit. Well, you can override the edit and you can go ahead and queue this claim. So I'm overriding that edit and I'm pushing it out. That's why it's important not to give everybody that that option, that security level. It's really more of maybe an office manager or an office admin that, again, 1 or 2 folks within your practice should have that security level. But I can override and push out. Okay. Let's take a look at Sienna here. Again, I can just go ahead and edit. I can take a look at the scrub report. And this one is telling me the diagnosis combination may be clinical. So this one here is a vision screening, and it has I believe that diagnosis code is not a vision code. So if I go back over here, I think that's constipation. Yep, it's abdominal pain. I should have used that diagnosis code. So if I come here, go and select that H code, hit my save there, and I scrub claim. It's coming back with another error. Now it's telling me the diagnosis code has code first. So this is underlying etiology sequence first. So again, this is actionable. It's not going to deny or reject, but it's telling me that the manifestation code, I can be more specific with this. Okay. So you can see as I fix issues, another issue may arise thereafter. And then I can go back again, and enter a different diagnosis code. I can make this more specific. I can keep adding to my my claims to make sure that they pass that edit. One thing I forgot to mention on that last one with that modifier is that this service, the integrated claims scrubber, works very nicely with our OP Aware library. And hopefully everyone on this call is utilizing Aware. But for that one, let me actually bring this over here real quick slide. So on that last code, that nebulizer that required the modifier, right? If you notice or realize that you're getting the same errors over and over and over, right? For something that's as simple as a modifier that needs to be attached to a specific CPT code, right? This will, highlight those type of items that the Aware library works very well hand in hand with the claim scrubber. So if I'm noticing that the 94664 should always have a 25 modifier for all my E&Ms, create an Aware rule. And so that way, when the conversion is occurring, it's going to populate that 25 and it's going to miss that claim edit. And one less piece of work that you need to do later down the road. Additionally, I took a screenshot here of one of the claim edits. You can see, this gets very detailed. So what it does, it's looking at each line item at the line item level, and then it's also looking at the claim collectively. So how does the CPT and the ICD, how do they work with each other at the line item level, and then again, collectively as a whole? And so the denials or the rejections or the potential denials are being highlighted within OP. So you can get something as big as this type of denial or report that comes back, or you can get one that comes back and says you're missing a modifier. So it really is pretty robust. And again, you can modify, you can make changes, you can do whatever you please with the edits within your own library, right? Like I said, you control this. If the modifiers are not accurate, or not the modifiers, if the edits are not accurate, or they're too strict or rigid, you can alter that. You can also create your own. If you have specific payers within your locale that require something that's completely different and unique than the national payers or something more at the national level, you can create your own edits as well. So as I work these edits and as the scrubs come back clean, they will fall off of the claims in review. And hopefully when you come in the next day or the same day and this is empty, right, you're good to go. That's one less denial, rejection you have to worry about. And that's all I have. I'm not sure, did I run out of time, Ellie?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for that. And for those that want to stay for Q&A, please do. We're going to go through some great questions. But for those that do need to drop, I wanted to point out two quick items. We do have a handout. It's labeled Claim Scrubber Webinar Resources. It's a PDF. If you go to your handout section, that has a link to the ROI calculator. We did have that as a question. So please utilize that along with the other PDFs. They're really great. The other item I wanted to mention for those that can't stay for the Q&A is we do have two $50 gift card giveaways. But in order to be qualified for those, you need to fill out the survey once you exit GoToWebinar. So with that being said, I would definitely like to get to some of these questions for those that want to stay. And Stuart and Matt, the first question that we have is how does this compare with what Encoder Pro does and Avality Essentials Pro?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know Encoder Pro is more of a front-end encoder, if you will, has tools for looking up codes as well as applying certain edits, primarily for the encounter level, has some helpful information. And it's a same, but a little different avenue of how it's applied. So with Claim Scrubber, you're going to be applying the edits but it doesn't necessarily, you would look into the tools of having to make those corrections. As Matt just walked through corrections, there is a sister product that we have called Easy. It's more in tune with Encoder Pro. Now, as far as the Availity solution, if that's more of an encoder as well, it may be a similar means to where they're looking for resources that give them more information, like, well, what modifiers can I apply for the CPT code, for instance? And certainly, we have those, because typically with our edits that Matt was showing, not only do we show the actual edit itself, or the definition of that edit, and explain why that edit fired, but we'll also, in many instances, have some corrective action that we would suggest that you take. So it would list the modifiers that you could certainly apply. It could list certain other actions for, like, if it's a bundling edit, which one's the component code compared to the comprehensive code. But certainly it's a little more diverse than, say, like Availity being a clearinghouse. They're still going to look at that from an accepted standpoint versus what is actually getting the claim denied.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Stuart, for answering that question. We have another one that came in as well. I definitely want to get to this one. It's, how many times can I submit a claim to insurance before they won't process it anymore?
Wow, that's a great question. I've never had that question before, but I would say you could submit it as many times as you want. I don't know of any limits. Certainly keep knocking on that door to be sure that you can get payment, but just bear in mind that every time you do, it's costing. It may not be a cost to you on the surface, but the effort it takes to process that claim. And if we're talking appeals, an appeals process may be a little different. So if you're appealing a claim versus resubmitting, that's entirely different. So in the appeals process, once it's appealed, the final determination is made. You really only appeal one time. So it really depends upon exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It's if you're constantly resubmitting, then I would probably stop that, because it is costly. And if it is for an appeal, as Stuart said, the appeal process is a little different than resubmitting. However, if you keep resubmitting the same claim over and over without going through the appeal process, they'll keep giving you the same answer. They won't change their answer.
Lovely. Thank you, gentlemen. We have two other questions, and we've still got quite a few attendees on, so I think we should go ahead and ask these.
Yeah.
How far back in time can I go back and try to reprocess a claim?
Yeah, certain timely filing, it depends on the payer. I would say, and Matt may chime in as well, but I think that you just got to check with your payer and what their timely filing guidance is. And the majority of the time, it's a year. Anything past a year is not going to get paid. But there's also different appeals timelines that vary by payer as well.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. It depends on timing, the timely filing, and that payer. Yeah, we all know, right? Payers are not going to make it easy on you, so they're going to make you jump through hoops, and at any moment they can try to. They're constantly trying to deny. Right? It's a constant fight. So the older the claim gets, the harder it becomes to get paid.
Yeah, that's well said, Matt, and thank you, Stuart. And one final question before I get to our final slide here is, what are the most common coding errors a pediatric practice should look for?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, the list that I gave is kind of the proof is in the pudding, and so to speak. It's definitely anything that has to do with immunizations. Those aren't necessarily denials, but you can see difficulties in invalid diagnosis codes. Not so much invalid, but they're just not appropriate for the age. There's certain age restrictions as the child is growing. There's certain things that apply to a certain age. There's also gender specific that are very specific to gender, as well as we're seeing a big influx of Z codes that are listed as primary. Z codes there's all kind of reasons for a Z code, but the population has increased because of social determinants of health, which are now being factors that a lot of payers are paying attention to. Those can never be listed as primary, but we, for some reason, see them as listed primary on just about the majority of claims that we're seeing these days.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to say this, we're getting a lot of questions. We'll wrap up here, but I've gotten a lot of questions from a lot of you that are on around cost, and I really encourage you to go to our survey at the end and get in touch with your account managers for sure. They're going to have all the details around how can this be implemented and around costs. So we have a great AM team. I'm sure they're really excited to hear from you. So definitely complete that survey. Um, Stuart, I really want to thank you for joining us today for this wonderful webinar
Sure.
and having you speak. And of course, our very own Matt Tadros, thank you as well for giving us a really outstanding demo. We really enjoyed having everyone on today. We do have 2 giveaways, like I said, and those giveaways are $50 Amazon gift cards. You do need to complete the survey in order to be in the running for that. So we do really encourage you to complete that survey. There's some really great handouts. Like I said, one is the Claim Scrubber webinar resources, and you can see that there's a link to the denials ROI calculator as well. So, we had got that question asked during the presentation. So really take advantage of that. On behalf of Stuart from Alpha 2, Matt Tadros from our team, and the entire OP team, of course, I want to thank everyone for attending and look out for future webinars from us. We hope you have a great, amazing rest of the week, and thank you so much.
Yes, thanks everyone.